I was 23 at the time, a journalism student at DePaul University in Chicago. Thanksgiving break had just started, and I had booked a flight home to Denver. But a heavy snowstorm rolled in that evening, grounding most outgoing flights. By midnight, mine was officially canceled with no hotel compensation or alternate options. I decided to tough it out overnight in the terminal instead of spending on a hotel. The area near Gate K9 was quiet, lit by flickering fluorescents and backed by tall glass windows. Only a handful of passengers remained, some curled under jackets, others tapping at dimly lit phones. It felt strangely disconnected, like time moved differently in that space. I found an open seat near a dusty vending machine and a squeaky outlet barely charging my phone. The floor was cold, the chairs were stiff, and the ambient noise felt louder in the emptiness. I tried watching an old video I had downloaded, but the audio kept glitching out. That's when I first heard it. Faint, high-pitched crying from somewhere behind me. I paused the video and glanced around, expecting to see a kid with a parent, but the terminal was still. No movement, no strollers, no families walking by. The crying continued, soft and distant, but eerily close at the same time. I stood up and peered toward the empty gate area, but it looked completely deserted. Thinking maybe a child was behind the wall near the bathrooms, I slowly walked that way. Each footstep echoed awkwardly, bouncing off tile and metal with an unnatural ring. As I turned the corner past a closed newsstand, the sound stopped abruptly. I waited for it to start again, but it didn't. Just silence and that ever-present hum. I returned to my seat, chalking it up to stress or someone walking by earlier. Still, my nerves felt slightly off, like my body knew something wasn't right. I turned my hoodie into a makeshift pillow and leaned against the cold window glass. Just as I began drifting off, the crying started again, but this time it was closer. My eyes snapped open and I sat upright, scanning everything around me. The older couple near the wall were still asleep, and the lone businessman was gone. Yet the sound of a child crying echoed again, clearer now and more rhythmic. It was coming from behind the vending machines, where no one should have been. I stood up slowly, half angry and half creeped out, thinking maybe someone was messing with me. I called out a soft, "Hello?" just in case someone needed help or was hurt. The crying stopped instantly, not faded, not slowed, just like someone had flipped a switch. That silence was worse than the crying had been. I walked slowly toward the vending machine, heart thudding louder than my footsteps. The crying hadn't just stopped, it vanished, mid-sound, like something unnatural cut it off. Behind the machine was just a narrow space and a gray wall, nothing large enough to hide in. Still, I peeked around carefully, expecting a prank or an abandoned toy. Nothing was there, no kid, no parent, no sound, just buzzing lights and the faint rattle of an old heater nearby. I felt something cold run down my spine, not from temperature, but instinct. Something about that sound had been off, too even, too repetitive, almost like a recording. But who would play something like that in the middle of the night? Trying to shake it off, I went back to my seat and checked the time, 2:41 a.m. My phone battery was down to 7%, and the charger had stopped working entirely. I debated moving closer to another outlet across the terminal, but the lights there were mostly off. The thought of walking through that shadowed space didn't sit right with me. As I sat there debating, movement caught my eye near gate K11, just beyond the far row of seats. I looked up quickly and spotted something small, a child, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, standing alone in the middle of the walkway. She wasn't crying this time, just staring straight ahead. Her face was pale, her clothes looked outdated, like a Sunday dress from decades ago. She wasn't holding anything, not even a bag or stuffed toy. I stood up and hesitantly called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't react, not even a flinch, just continued standing there with her arms at her side. I took a step toward her, but she turned and walked, not ran, down the corridor toward the closed security checkpoint. Something about the way she moved felt off, too smooth, too steady. I hurried after her, trying to keep her in sight while glancing around for any adult, but the terminal was still empty. When I turned the corner where she had gone, the hallway was empty, just the faint light of the exit sign glowing above the security lanes. I whispered, "Hello?" again, quieter this time, unsure if I even wanted her to answer. My voice bounced softly off the walls like I was in a vacuum. I started to walk backward, not turning my back on the dark hallway. My shoes squeaked louder than I remembered, and the silence behind me felt thick. Then I heard it again, the crying, but this time it was right behind me. I froze. For a second, I genuinely couldn't move. The sound wasn't natural anymore. It was like multiple voices crying together, layered and unnatural, echoing at different speeds. I spun around, and there was nothing. No girl, no movement, just rows of chairs and flickering lights. But I felt something, like someone had just been inches from my neck. I walked briskly back toward the open part of the terminal, heart racing, every instinct screaming at me to leave. I passed the older couple again, still asleep, but something was wrong. The coats they were under had shifted, but they hadn't. Their bodies looked unnaturally still, like mannequins. I moved past them, trying not to look again, but a quiet voice broke the silence. "She's not supposed to be here." It came from a gate agent's desk, but when I turned, there was no one, just an old radio playing faint static. I don't know why, but that sentence chilled me more than anything else. I didn't sit down this time. I paced slowly, pretending to check the flight screens just to stay alert. Every time I passed by a gate window, I glanced out, hoping for morning light. But it was still pitch black beyond the runway, as if time itself was stuck. That's when I saw her reflection, not in the window, in the glossy airport tile beneath me. Her reflection stood there, but mine didn't. She was behind me again, this time closer, head tilted slightly like she was trying to understand me. I turned fast, hard in my throat, empty again. I started speaking out loud, not to her, but to whatever was listening. "I don't know who you are. I'm just trying to get home." My voice cracked. The stillness after I spoke was suffocating, like the whole airport was holding its breath. Then, without warning, every flight monitor shut off. The buzzing overhead lights flickered once and dimmed halfway. My ears popped slightly, like the pressure had shifted. I looked around in disbelief. The exit signs were glowing red, the only real light source now. The girl was gone again, but now something else felt wrong with the air itself. It was cold, like a basement in winter despite no draft. The crying returned, only now it sounded closer and younger, like a baby struggling to breathe. It rose and fell in pitch, never quite forming words, just painful rhythmic sobs. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran toward the main escalator. The escalator was off, but I climbed it quickly, desperate to reach a more open space. As I reached the upper level, the noise stopped. Silence again. I paused and looked back down, and there she was, standing at the bottom, staring up, completely still. Her eyes were wrong. They were black. Not like evil or possessed, just empty. No whites, no movement, like painted marbles. I didn't wait. I ran toward the front entrance of the terminal, but the glass doors didn't budge. I slammed my fists on them, panicking. I turned around and saw movement, not hers this time. A security guard walking from a side hallway. Relief washed over me like a wave. I shouted, waved my hands. He stopped and looked confused. "You all right?" he asked, his voice the first real human sound I'd heard in hours. I told him about the girl. He frowned and said, "You sure you're not dreaming, kid?" But then he added something that made my stomach twist. "You're not the first person to say that. Every couple years, someone reports a crying child near K11. He hesitated. "That gate's been closed since '98. I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know. I just sat down near the front until dawn came and flights resumed. I boarded without looking back. I've been to that airport twice since, but I never go near that concourse. Something was wrong that night, and I think it knew I saw it. If you ever get stuck alone at O'Hare overnight, don't follow the crying. Don't look at your reflection. And if you see a little girl near gate K11, walk the other way. Don't speak, don't blink, and for the love of God, don't listen to her cry." If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm a 33-year-old single dad from Aurora, Colorado. My son Mason is 8, a quiet kid, always glued to my side, especially in unfamiliar places. We were flying to San Diego for spring break, just the two of us, something we'd planned for months. The delay at Denver International hit just after we cleared security and found our gate. They announced a 3-hour wait, so we took seats near gate C48, surrounded by scattered travelers and tired families. Mason curled up with his Switch and headphones while I scrolled my phone. After a while, I told him I'd go grab us some snacks and coffee, and he nodded without looking up. I walked toward the nearest vendor, still within sight of our gate. I was gone maybe 10 minutes at most. When I came back, his seat was empty. No Mason, no backpack, and no switch. I checked the bathrooms first, then the Starbucks line, calling his name as I moved. No one had seen him, not the baristas, not the people at nearby gates. No one. Panic didn't hit me all at once. It crept in while I retraced my steps and realized no one had noticed a thing. A mother and her teen daughter nearby said they never even saw a kid sitting there. That made no sense. He'd been right next to them for half an hour. I flagged down TSA and explained that my son was missing, that he was just at gate C 48 minutes ago. They treated me like I was confused at first, even asked if I was sure we came through security together. That question rattled me more than I can explain. Of course we had. I held his hand through the line. They asked for proof, so I showed them the boarding passes. 2 tickets, 1 adult, 1 child. I showed them a photo of Mason on my phone, the one he took at the check-in kiosk. I could tell from the look on the officer's face that something wasn't adding up in their system. They brought me to a back room to check the footage. I remember my heart pounding so hard, it made my vision blur. The screen showed me walking through security exactly like I said. Jacket off, laptop out, backpack scanned. But there was no Mason behind me. I asked them to rewind, to look again, to check another angle. But every camera showed the same thing. Me, walking through alone. My voice cracked when I tried to explain that I remembered holding his hand, remembered his little red hoodie. None of it was there on screen. I pulled up more photos on my phone, a video from just that morning, him brushing his teeth in the hotel. I had messages from him, even a recent location ping from his phone. But the officer kept saying, "Sir, no child was scanned into this terminal with you." I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw, what I remembered. Mason had walked beside me through security, held my sleeve when we passed the drug-sniffing dog. I even remembered him asking if we could get pretzels instead of chips. None of this was in the footage. The officer's tone shifted from sympathetic to cautious, like I was wasting their time or worse. They asked if I had taken any medication, if I had custody of my son, if I was stressed. My voice rose when I said I wanted to speak to airport police. That's when they asked me to wait in a separate room. Inside that room, the walls felt closer than they should have. No windows, just a humming air vent and a long metal table. I texted Mason again, even though I knew I wouldn't get a reply. But that little bubble turning from blue to green, that hit me hard. After an hour, an officer came in with a printout from the gate cameras. "We went back to when you were seated," he said. "The seat was always empty." My hands shook as I showed him a photo I'd taken at the gate. Mason sitting with his legs crossed, eating trail mix. He looked at the photo, then back at me. "When exactly did you take this?" he asked. I told him, 3:37 p.m. He flipped over the time-stamped footage. The seat was empty. There was no one next to me the entire time. I zoomed into the photo. You could clearly see the gate sign behind Mason. I even pointed out the woman in the pink hoodie sitting 2 seats down. "She's there in the video," the officer said, "but no kid next to you. You were alone." My mind couldn't keep up. I was either losing it or something unexplainable was happening. I asked them to check Mason's phone GPS again. They said the phone had never pinged inside the terminal. Its last location was the parking garage. That made no sense. I remember Mason taking a picture of the plane from the gate window. I remember him laughing at a little dog wearing shoes. But according to the footage and data, Mason never even entered the terminal. I felt like the floor had tilted under me. They asked me to stay overnight at the airport hotel until further questions could be answered. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mason, sitting in that plastic airport chair, swinging his legs, wearing that red hoodie. But no one else did. I didn't leave Denver the next day. I couldn't. I sat in the airport lobby long after my flight boarded, staring at families walking past me. Kids tugging on their parents' sleeves, little backpacks bouncing on their shoulders. None of them looked twice at me. The police questioned me again, gently this time, like they were starting to believe something wasn't adding up either. They reviewed more footage, searched the parking garage, even asked me if Mason had ever talked about running away. He hadn't. He was 8. He still held my hand crossing busy streets. A detective showed me something later that made my blood run cold. It was a still frame from the footage, taken when I left for snacks. The seat beside me looked empty, but in the reflection on the window, there was Mason, clear as day, sitting there, looking straight ahead. I asked them to play the full video with the reflection visible. As I watched, I saw something that didn't make sense. At 3:45 p.m., Mason's reflection turned his head toward the camera, even though I wasn't there. A few seconds later, the reflection faded, like a fog lifting. No one could explain it. They gave me back my phone and told me they'd stay in touch. I went home alone, still expecting a call saying they'd found him. It's been 6 months. The case is still open, but the updates have slowed to a trickle. They still have my luggage. I can't walk past an airport without feeling that same sick panic rising in my throat. I stopped flying entirely. Every now and then, I get a notification on my phone. Mason's iPad signed into Wi-Fi. It always shows the same place, Denver International Terminal C. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or glitches in reality, or whatever else people might say. I just know my son sat beside me that day. I can still feel the weight of his little backpack when I remember slinging it over my shoulder. He was real. Sometimes when I try to fall asleep, I hear airport announcements in my head. Flight delayed, gate change, boarding group C. I'll wake up with my heart pounding, expecting to see that empty chair beside me. I don't know if I'll ever stop hearing those sounds. If you ever find yourself stuck in an airport overnight, keep an eye on the reflections. Sometimes they show you things you're not supposed to see. And if you hear your child's voice but don't see them, don't look away. I work as a veterinary technician in Boise, Idaho. My job usually keeps me close to animals, but last December I had to fly to San Diego for a training conference. It was my first solo trip in years, and I was already nervous. The airport was nearly empty when I arrived at 5 a.m. The ticketing area was dim and quiet, with that cold, sterile lighting I've always hated. I got through security faster than expected, and with 2 hours left before boarding, I wandered the terminal. Most shops were closed, and only a few people sat scattered across rows of metal chairs. Near Gate 14, I spotted a small boy crouched behind a row of seats. He had a little green coat and messy blonde hair, probably no older than 6. He peeked out, smiled at me, then ducked back behind the seats like he was playing hide and seek. I scanned for his parents, but there was no one close by. A couple of older men stared at their phones, and a janitor mopped quietly a few gates down. When I looked back, the boy was gone. I didn't hear footsteps or laughter. He just wasn't there anymore. I walked over to check behind the seats, but they were completely empty. No bags, no toys, no sign a kid had been there. I even knelt down, checking under the chairs, but nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. Trying not to feel weird, I assumed he ran off to his parents nearby. I sat down with my coffee, scrolling my phone. But after a few minutes, I saw him again, across the terminal now, peeking out from behind a vending machine. I stood up and walked toward him slowly. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked gently, not wanting to scare him. He didn't reply, just stared, wide-eyed, and then darted out of view again. It felt more like instinct than a game. This time I followed. I rounded the vending machine and looked down the hall, but he was gone again. This part of the airport was mostly empty, yet somehow he kept disappearing. I checked every corner, every possible hiding spot. Finally, I gave up and walked back to Gate 14. As I passed the window, something caught my eye. The reflection showed the boy standing directly behind me, still, silent, just watching. But when I spun around, the space was empty. I didn't sit back down after that. My heart was racing, and I kept glancing behind me, half expecting the boy to be there again. I told myself it was just nerves and lack of sleep, but I couldn't shake that reflection. It didn't feel like a trick of light. Eventually, I walked over to the information desk. A young woman in uniform greeted me politely, and I asked if anyone had reported a missing child. She looked confused, clicked around on her screen, and shook her head. "No children are listed for any flights departing before 9. I told her what I saw, the little boy, the way he vanished, how he appeared in reflections. She gave me a look I've seen before, polite concern mixed with disbelief. "Security can check the footage if you're really worried," she said. So I agreed, just to get peace of mind. A TSA agent met me near their office and walked me to a small, windowless room. I described the area: Gate 14, vending machines, even the green jacket the boy wore. The agent scrubbed through footage with practiced ease, scanning timestamps and angles. "Here," he said. The camera showed me walking to the vending machine. I could even see myself pause, talking to someone, but there was no child, no green coat, nothing. Just me, looking down a hallway at empty space. He rewound it twice to be sure. I kept saying, "But I saw him. He was there." The agent stayed quiet and finally said, "You looked like you were following something, but nothing's on our end." My stomach sank. I knew what I saw. I walked back toward the gate in a daze. Everything looked the same, sterile, quiet, uneventful, but now it felt hostile, like the air itself was watching me. I sat near a window, trying not to cry or panic. Then I saw him again, just standing outside the gate door that leads to the tarmac. No one should be there, no staff, no passengers, definitely not a barefoot child in freezing morning air. He didn't move, he just stared at me. When I blinked, he was gone again. But now, my nerves weren't the only thing off. My phone screen had frozen on the last photo I'd taken during the trip. I hadn't touched it, but there was something new in the corner of the image, a blurry shape I didn't remember. By now, I was fighting the urge to bolt out of the airport. I told myself I must have been imagining things, but the strange photo, the boy's lingering presence, it felt too real. I pulled my bag closer, trying to distract myself by watching the clock. It was past 3 a.m., and I was no closer to any answers. I went back to the security desk and asked if they had any further updates on the footage. The same agent from before looked at me, his face now filled with concern. "There's no record of any child entering the terminal in the last few hours, ma'am," he said gently. "Are you sure you're all right? You seem a bit shaken." I was on the verge of snapping. "I saw him," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "He was there. He's not just a figment." I wasn't crazy, I knew what I saw, but the agent didn't seem convinced, his gaze now shifting uncomfortably around the room. Before I could say anything else, the loudspeaker crackled. The call for my flight to board echoed through the terminal. It was the last flight of the night, and I needed to get on it, to leave, to forget this strange, terrifying encounter. I grabbed my bag and headed toward the gate, hoping that once I boarded the plane, I could leave all of this behind me. The lights above flickered as I walked, casting strange shadows on the walls. A small chill ran down my spine, but I tried to ignore it. The boy couldn't be there. He wasn't real. As I approached the gate, the door to the jetway swung open. There, standing near the door, was the child, barefoot, staring directly at me. He wasn't a figment. He wasn't a shadow. He was real. His hollow eyes locked with mine, and in that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. "Why are you following me?" I whispered, heart pounding in my chest. The boy didn't speak. He didn't move, but there was something in his stillness that made every muscle in my body tense up. The moment stretched, unbearable, until suddenly, his body flickered like static on a TV. And then, just like that, he was gone. No footsteps, no sound. Only an eerie, unsettling silence. I rushed onto the plane, my hands trembling. The flight attendants offered a polite smile, but I could hardly focus on anything other than the strange, eerie sensation clinging to me. As I sank into my seat, I felt the weight of something heavy on my chest. It wasn't the fear of what I saw. It was the unease of what I couldn't explain. After the plane took off, I tried to calm myself. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't. The child was real, but he couldn't have been, could he? My mind kept racing, and the cabin lights flickered briefly before they stabilized. But there was something else I couldn't shake. A voice, soft and distant, whispering in the back of my mind. It wasn't the boy's voice. No, this one was a low hum, a voice that sounded like it was coming from a very long way away. A voice saying, "He's not real, but I am." I never saw the boy again.